Thank you, Ananya, for joining the podcast with Imran. I changed the name though. It was the podcast with Imran Sheikh. Now it's Imran's podcast, so
I
simplified.
like it.
How are you doing? Oh,
Mm.
you can sip your coffee. Yeah.
Things are good, Imran. How are you?
Just recovered. I had COVID. I'm still eating the cough candy a little bit.
Oh,
So
right. You had told me. Yeah.
yeah, so I don't even know if it was COVID or not, but I do feel it was. Speaking of COVID, mental health care has been a big challenge, and especially mental space, right? Like taking care of your mental fitness in this case, since COVID, right? And you've been doing Startup Full Circle, for how long has it been?
I think I started FullCircle, but as a different company in my freshman year. So it's been 4.5 years maybe, but obviously have gone through many, many pivots. Also think when you're in university, you don't really
Yeah,
um pay attention to how quickly time goes.
yeah.
So I would say full time on FullCircle, it's been probably a year and a half, 2 years. But other than that, dabbled with a lot of things under FullCircle's name for a while. So a lot of people would say more than 2 years, but I would say, full time 2 years.
Yeah, so in that case, like that's why I wanted to talk to you. You are
Mhm.
the best person when it comes to uh mental fitness.
Mhm.
It's becoming, even in my previous workspaces, I've seen that a conversation happening. Um, and so to dive a bit more, can you talk about your background? How did you get into this space? Let's start from there.
Um, I got into this space. My story starts when I started losing all my hair when I was in college. So I don't know how long you've been following me or FullCircle, but I've been very public about my own struggles. And during my second year of engineering, I was juggling too many jobs and I was paying for college quite a bit on my own. And I think a lot of immigrants will relate to this. Going to the US, especially for undergrad, is a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
Um, and you struggle. And I think for a lot of people who are paying their own way through college, it's an added struggle.
Hmm.
So for me, it college was very much struggle. It was some of the best and but mostly the worst time of my life. And I really struggled during my second year of engineering because the freshman year still you ease into.
Yeah.
But as you get into your second year, you really get into the stride of the US education system. So for me, I started losing my hair in March or May of my second year. I don't quite remember. But within a month, I had no hair on my head. So my hair started falling out in clumps at the beginning of the month. I think it was right before my exams. By the
Hmm.
end of the month, I had no hair on my head. I was 19 years old. At 19 years old, I was losing all my hair and I was bald. So if you think about that for a minute and you think about what that does to someone,
Hmm.
it can dramatically change your life. I also happen to be a woman. Um, and so for a woman to lose her hair, I think more so than men being bald, which is more acceptable, I think. It's very strange, especially as
Yeah.
an 18-year-old. Um, so for me, I think that was my wake up call. For the longest time, I did not know what was wrong with me. I didn't think I had
Hmm.
the words to describe what was going wrong. It was a combination of stress, and lots of other things, which I've talked about quite a bit. But I think everyone needs a wake up call every now and then in your life. That was mine. At the time I was doing engineering, I was a materials engineer by training, and I really struggled to figure out what was wrong with me. So I went to my doctors in the US and they did a bunch of blood tests. All of them were either negative or inconclusive. I had some vitamin deficiencies, but by and large, no one could figure out what was wrong with me. And so I kind of self fell into this rabbit hole of helping my own self. And I started sharing more about my story online, which is, I think, how you found me
Yeah.
also on LinkedIn. Um, I think that attracted a lot of press, a lot of attention. And I realized that no one was really solving the problem the way I wanted to solve it. And that was a hard realization because I never wanted to do anything other than engineering my entire life. I was
Hmm.
dead set on getting a PhD. I had dreamed about becoming a doctor. I had switched to engineering. Um, never really wanted to start a company. It was not on my radar. My family was a business family, and I had seen what it was like running a business. So I was as far away from the business world as you can get. But I think you always fall back to your roots, and I think
Mm.
that's how it happened. So, did I answer your question, Imran?
Yeah, no, it's very I'm trying to put words together. Very resonating for me personally. I have been through the same thing. Stress does adds up, and mental fitness and the challenges that you're talking about, like when you are a undergrad student, you have challenges, keeping up with your study life, work, trying to pay the bills, rent, all that good stuff and bad stuff. Um, with that being said, before tapping, so was this the initial cause that you were like, you know what, I need to solve this problem and I'm gonna do it by myself, with Full Circle? I know it's in stealth, so we'll move away a little bit from that. Just talk about like, was this the driving force for your startup, or was there something else as well?
I started Full Circle in my freshman year, and like I said, I was working on engineering projects. So
Hmm.
I think we started Full Circle as a turbine company in my
Interesting.
freshman year. I was big into biomimicry, which was
Hmm.
applying biological principles into mathematics and converting them into engineering goods.
Hmm.
One of the things that we had come across is building this jellyfish-inspired turbine, and we
What's that?
became, honestly, that's a whole different conversation. That
Okay.
could we're not. But to bring it back to your question, I think we started Full Circle. I mean, I started Full Circle very much as a typical out of your dorm room college kind of
Hmm.
startup that was engineering heavy. It was a bunch of 7 engineers that got together to build this turbine. We
Hmm.
were incredibly successful at the engineering aspect and incredibly horrible at the sales aspect. So that was something that I learned early on, that you cannot build something and expect people to come. That was one of my lessons very early on. Within 3 months
Hmm.
of doing that, I knew very quickly where we were going wrong. So
Hmm.
for me, dabbled a ton in college. And then, like I said, because the project was going so well from a technical standpoint, we were the first people who were selected from my university for this international biomimicry challenge that was um, that was supposed to provide us funding to bring this to life. And we did really well. Things were going well. And that's when I started losing my hair. So I came from this background of things going exceptionally well for me, which
Hmm.
was my university was giving me this genius award for my research. I was in the top 1% of my university, called something called the Grand Challenges program. Everything that you could have going for your life at the time, I had going for me. And then came this big dip with
Wow.
losing my hair and not doing so well. And that
So,
changed everything.
so that brings me to a question, right? Like now, fast forward years later, we
Mhm,
are seeing this push with AI. I had a chance to play with this one AI app coming out of YC, though,
mhm,
about mental health as well. Um, I have two loaded questions, so I'll break it into one. The
mhm,
first one is, why is that even we have so much awareness, like compared to a few years ago, after COVID, everybody is like, oh, mental health, mental health. We're
mhm,
still seeing challenges with that. We still see a lot of, from workspace perspective, a lot of employees burn out, a lot of imposter syndrome, a lot of, uh, must I say, also competitive, like unreasonable competitiveness. I'm just gonna coin a new word right now.
mhm.
Even though we have come so far, we are seeing a lot of that. What's going wrong in this space, or what's not wrong, but can you define that for the listeners? Like, what's exactly happening? Like, why are we still seeing this happening more and more? Is it because people have more awareness in the space, or something is going on?
So let me put it into context for you this way. It's not an easy problem to solve, and here's why. Let's put it in the context of the human heart, right?
Hmm.
Let's go back to history. The human heart was discovered in the second AD, and we really started to dabble with the human heart in the 17th century. Now, in 2020, heart disease was the top cause of death in the US. So just think about that timeline for a minute. Compare that to the brain. I think the first time we discovered the brain was also in the second AD or around the second AD. We really looked into it again in the 17th century. I think the 17th century is when a lot of good things happened for us. But then something happened, and we didn't really understand how the brain works. And we only identified the first hormone connected to the brain health, serotonin, in 1930. So if in the second AD you discovered the heart, and in 2020 it was the leading cause of death, and by comparison, brain health, we only started first discovering the first hormone in 1930. We have a long way to go. So when people think about, when I see companies that make these grandiose claims that they will solve the mental health problem, I'm an eternal optimist. You have to be to start a company. But those claims are incorrect. They're just scientifically incorrect. They're just not based in facts. You can help people along the way. And I think for different people, mental health means different things. So the subjective nature of what mental health means to different people, I think you said it yourself, which was you coined a new term right now, sitting with me on this podcast. So for you, mental health means something different. For me, mental health means something different. In the lack of an objective way to define it, and in the lack of this whole history that we have that's just missing on the scientific side, people are making a ton of money selling all kinds of solutions to mental health. I'll give you an example. There's a ton of startup founders who get into mental health for the right reasons, but also for the wrong reasons. We have a desperate population. Some people sell pills, hyper personalized pills that say that they will help you with your brain health. Do they really? You can look to doctors and see. I mean, there's Dr. Mike on YouTube who talks a ton about debunking these vitamin pills and anyone who says that they're doing something for that'll help with your brain health. The other thing that I think should be clear is startups like BetterHelp that help connect therapists to patients, and they were touted as being one of the biggest movers in this space. They were sued in 2023 for selling patient information and sensitive data to Snapchat and Facebook just to keep business operations alive. So, Imran, I mean, I've been in this space for a long time. If you really ask me to dissect six
This is
years,
good.
4 years worth of studying and data and research into a 30-minute podcast, I don't think we'd be able to. But beyond the podcast, I'm happy to talk to you about. It really depends.
Yeah,
We can go into 15 minutes of me just rambling on about this, but I want to be mindful of what you want to do. So what do
no,
you about?
no, this is actually pretty good because you're exploring spaces which I even didn't think about, right? Like, one dying question I've had as a consumer of these mental health apps is they're also trying to keep the lights on. So they start in a good space, but then you do feel like, are these sessions like a subscription to keep me alive for their business, or is it really solving my problem? So I do agree with you, like going into this furthermore is going to be like an hour-long conversation. The second question to which I had was around um, specifically to these AI companies. And since you've been along in the space, what is your personal thing that you're seeing like a lot of these AI companies are doing, whether they're using open source tools like Whisper or GPT or AI tools to, they can train it, right? To be your personal therapist, on either on the phone, either like an avatar or like text message. If you could step back, because I look at that personal space and I'm like, oh wow, this is pretty cool. Someone will do something good here, and a big healthcare company may come in. Kaiser may be like, we want to buy it. That's
Mhm.
like a very different. But from a mental health first perspective, what are your thoughts that you're seeing that you're like, this makes sense, this doesn't make sense, or your take on it?
That's a loaded question again. I think let's look at the facts again. So I think the reason people switch to, and I say this after having analyzed a ton of companies in this space, the reason people switch to AI to solve mental health is because there was a supply and demand issue. There are tons of people who want therapists. There's not enough supply of therapists. Different states have different amounts of therapists. And because there are different numbers of therapists, every therapist charges a different amount. The
Hmm.
other issue is reimbursement rates for therapists are incredibly low. So
Hmm.
even if a therapist sees a patient, reimbursement from insurance companies is a massive problem for therapists also, right? So long story short, the AI companies that I see as incumbents in this space came up because they were trying to solve the supply and demand issue.
Yeah.
Now, can you really solve the supply and demand issue by introducing technology? I don't think so. My personal thesis around that is a no, because you can reduce the barrier through which people can find the right therapist. I think some of the AI companies that will do really well are the companies that will let you try a therapist's vibe by talking to their chatbot.
Hmm.
Can they really replace the therapist in totality? No, because you cannot replace human interaction and that one-on-one connection with technology. And I think instead of replacing therapists, what they'll do is augment therapists' capabilities to take on more. So let's put it in this context. The way I think about AI in healthcare is the following. There are so many things in healthcare that are not directly tied to patient or person facing care. There are a
Hmm.
ton of things in healthcare that are on the logistical side
Yeah.
that make the healthcare industry work and make the mental health care sector work.
Hmm.
They're not always patient facing, but small efficiency increases on the back end can make massive differences on the front end.
Yeah.
So if you use AI to increase operational efficiency, you can go a long ways. One of the things that if you're very interested in the healthcare spectrum, or if you're very interested in mathematics, is the Baumol's cost disease diagram. Now I'm going into very specific things, and maybe this is getting boring,
Yeah.
but Baumol's cost disease diagram is this diagram that says service-based industries have this
Hmm.
graph that consistently keeps going up. So
Yeah.
costs keep increasing because people's wages keep increasing, but the rise in productivity is not the same, right?
Interesting.
So if you look up Baumol's cost disease diagram for healthcare, the biggest inflation in healthcare costs is on the Baumol's cost disease diagram. Healthcare is the one that is the highest inflated on the
Hmm.
Baumol's cost disease historically. I won't go into the nitty-gritties of it. Long
Hmm.
story short, I think if AI companies do come in, they are going to help, but in a different way. I don't think you can replace healthcare professionals, but I do think you can create efficiencies in the system. So small width, but long inroads is how I like to call it. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah, no, this is actually pretty good. What you talked about is like have a vibe check with the therapist
Mm-hmm.
to see, like, you can train that based on each therapist and be like, hey, is there a match or not? Like, just same as coaching, same as mentoring. I think it makes sense if this could be replicated. I know we are on time as well. Like, I still want to, if you want to share anything about Full Circle, like, I know you're installed, anything in particular that you want to share, something exciting. That's one question. You can choose to share, not share, that's okay. But the last part I have,
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually following you on LinkedIn for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
and mental health space or mental health is very personal to me, even to date.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have, everybody has, and I'm very vocal about this. Especially men's health is very uh, poo-pooed, it's not in the mainstream. Um, Anything that you have to share when it comes to mental health? Like it could be anything epiphany or any some big thought that you can that I can make an A as a clip as it and share with people because I think a lot of people back when I'm from originally from they look at mental health and slap it together, get your shit together, and just move on with your life, right? It's really not center. They don't believe in depression. They don't believe in stress. It's certainly called excuses, which is very sad.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Anything, any epiphany, any big learnings that you can share with everyone that could be useful.
Man, I have very controversial takes. So I think I'm going to get canceled if I continue this conversation.
It
But
is fun.
but I think it's very hard to summarize something, especially because I think it can be taken out of context. I say a lot of controversial things and then they get taken out of context and then people make a big deal out of it. And then the next thing I know, there's a Forbes article on it. So um I think people do a variety of things to get through their lives in and keep their sanity,
Mhm.
right? So if you struggle with mental health and you think therapy is the right option for you and you really find peace in it, then you go for it. So for me, for example, I find peace in religion. I'm extremely religious. I fast every Saturday. I may have moved to the US, but I retain my Indian roots. In fact, I'm quite religious in that way. And so for me, that brings me peace. Some people would say that's not relevant to mental health. Other people would take a vitamin pill and they feel satisfied with it. Some of my friends take vitamin D and B12 pills, which I think are very good. There's a ton of evidence that your physical health is linked to your mental health. Like I said, there's lots of paths to take, and I think people and science are still trying to figure out mental health as a space. We have a long way to go. I think the only thing I would say is if you come across companies or if you come across founders or if you come across products that promise to be a one stop solution, please be extremely skeptical. This is also why I choose to talk about FullCircle very limited and in very limited fashions, is because I started the company with the right intentions because it was something that was so personal to me, which is also why we are not publicly coming out and saying, wow, we've revolutionized mental health. We are very deliberate in the way we move. Everything is very intentional. So that's the only thing I would stop at is do the things that bring you peace of mind. Don't look down on other people who are doing things to get through life because life is so hard and so messy for people that you just need to get through it somehow. So do what you can for yourself. Be skeptical of companies and founders who overpromise because they will underdeliver. There is no cure. Um, History was not built that way. And keep going would be my thing. The last thing I would say is reach out to your friends and have good friends because I think the people you surround yourself with can have a massive impact on how you live your life. I've certainly been a witness to that. So invest in your relationships. That's all I have.
This is way deep. I will be really honest on this. What you shared is very deep. And I like the part that you shared your personal aspect as well, because yes, there are certain things even I do get closer to religion as well.
Mhm.
Because that's fine. Whatever brings you peace, mental stability, and definitely talking to your friends is very key. The reason I'm gonna like recall that or
Mhm.
emphasize that more, Ananya, and I know you're on a time now. I actually lost a friend uh, because of mental health. I don't want to go further, but it wasn't in the best form when I found out what happened.
I'm
And so
sorry.
it's been like so I always keep checking up on my friends. So I want to re-enunciate what Ananya is saying is really key. Have good friends, talk about mental health, and do what gives you sanity, but don't go crazy. Like don't find do you want to enunciate that? Like people hopefully don't take that as oh, drugs makes me good. You don't mean that, right? Just want to be Is that fair? So just want to call that out, but I do understand what you're talking about. I know we're on time, Ananya, so thank you. I know it was very hard to get you in the schedule. I know you're super busy with your startup. I'm super
And
excited.
I'm
Hopefully,
so sorry about the scheduling stuff. I think it's a
no worries.
startups are chaotic.
No, no, no. That's great. That means you're moving further along. But thank you for your time, Ananya, and hopefully in the future we'll have a longer episode, probably talking more about full circle in this case.
Always open to that, Imran. Take care. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.